Okay, we've changed the tape now. You were talking about that hillside
Yeah, where the French had been staying for months and months, and they naturally hadn't done any cleaning, and we had to sleep on beds without ticks, just shucks and hay. We had to sleep with our clothes on. We couldn't even unlace our shoes. We couldn't take a gas mask off. Couldn't take off our helmets. We had to sleep with our helmets on.
This was inside a cave.
Inside of a dugout, a hill that had been dug out, and rooms all back in there, and walkways through there, just like a mine, I guess.
Fort.
Yeah, we had cots head to head, foot to foot, in there, and you could walk down between two rows of cots. That's
How
all.
was it lighted?
It wasn't lighted very much.
You must have had some kind of lamp.
We could have a candle or two.
That's mother, yeah.
I tell you, pepper is word on kind of those old firecrackers. Most people shooting firecrackers. Come here, Pepper.
Well,
Yeah.
Come here, Pepper. Come here,
Well, go ahead, Dad. I mean, it wasn't in darkness most of the time?
yes, was. Wasn't that, you couldn't have a light in there except way inside.
Uh-huh.
Couldn't have a light near the entrance.
Well,
And outdoors.
were the officers in there too?
Yeah, we had officers, commanders.
Uh-huh.
We had, they had a special place near the outside of the hill with a nicer quarters to stay in than the men had. But we got lice on us, and we had fleas all over us. We couldn't unbutton our shirts, take off our helmets, gas masks, or anything. And one day we got out there on the side of the hill from the enemy, on the opposite side from them. We could get out there and sit around the sun, in daytime. They couldn't see us unless they flew over us with an airplane.
Yeah.
Well, we got out there and we got to pulling down our leggings. You had wrap leggings, You'd start down here and wrap them around just like lightning and tie them down in here. And we let the leggings down and got pulling our pant legs up, and we found that underneath our knee, where the leg bends, we'd have a roll of fur, kind of soft, cottony stuff that had rolled up off our underwear. And we'd pull that out, and it'd be just filled with lice and fleas.
Oh my God.
And they just ate us up practically. So we didn't change clothes, shave, do anything except lie around with our clothes on. And we'd have to stand duty. We'd stand guard, two at a time. We had a dugout, a ditch around the side next to the enemy with it camouflaged up above the edge, camouflaged so they couldn't possibly see that it was a camouflaged ditch, trench, unless it came over an airplane.
Yeah.
And we were in a quiet front. They had a habit of sending them up on the front first to a quiet sector to get them kind of acclimated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we were out there, standing out there one day.
How long did you stay there, do you remember?
About 10 days.
Oh.
About 10 days we stayed there. And we practiced guard duty and just sitting around on the side of the hill in daytime. And we just didn't do anything but guard. We observed, see what we see. We had a pair of good field glasses at each post, about 200 yards apart. And each pair of men had a pair of field glasses. And we could watch them over there. We'd supposed to watch them all day long, see what was going on over there. And they were gardening over there, raising.
The Germans?
Yeah, it was a quiet sector.
I
Hardly ever a shell fell over there. So every time one shell would go over there, they would all hide for hours and hours. You couldn't see anybody.
see.
And it was interesting. We could hear the guns shoot way over here to the left, After a while, we'd hear the bullet come by, and we'd see it explode, and then hear it explode.
I see.
Some of them come by straight, making a keen, sharp musical noise, and some of them be flopping in the air.
Mhm.
The roar of the gun determined that, you know. If a gun had been used too much and had that rifling ruined, it would wobble. Oh, well,
I see.
we had an interesting thing to happen there. The Moselle River was between us and the Germans, and we had to get our water out of a spring down at the foot of that hill. And the Germans got their water there too. And I
Same
never did.
spring,
Yeah,
or now they were on the other side of the river. weren't
Yeah, well, they'd go down there and talk to one another. The Germans and our troops, they'd go down there for water. And one day, our water cart was carried off down there, and the boys didn't come back. So we figured the Germans took them in. So that put us on edge a little
You mean
bit.
they never returned?
No.
They were captured?
Yeah. But one or two times I heard of them going down there and just having a chat with them, getting the water and come on back.
It's like the Civil War.
Yeah.
A little bit.
It was a terrible thing. We stayed there about 10 days. And then we were all ordered to leave that place and go up nearer the city. Well, there was a little town between this hill that we were in, and there was a little town between that hill that was occupied by us and Pontamuso.
Mhm.
So we went up to that little town to spend a few nights, a little closer to the front. And they threw some shells over that way, and we had orders to take to cover. And they had cellars along the streets and stairways down into the cellars of a lot of the houses, you know. And our cellar that this small group of men of ours got into, they filled their room up, and a lot of them were sitting on the bottom steps, and I was sitting out on the top step. I didn't get in there, but nothing happened seriously. They just dumped a shell or two over there. So then next morning, we loaded up our trucks with troops and went up to the city or town of Pontamuso on the Moselle River. It had been a pretty large little town, and it had a college there of some type, and we rode up there in trucks, and they saw us coming, and they shelled us all the way up there and tore up some of our trucks, killed some of our men, wounded them. We got into the town, and we occupied, my group, or my small group I was with, occupied the college quarter, the college building, and it was right next to a church with a tall steeple. It was on one corner of the street, and this college was on the other. And we were over here in this college, which had been vacated, and all the things taken out that they wanted, and they had left a lot of books in the library and different things that they couldn't carry with them. The town had been vacated.
I see.
Nobody was supposed to be in there but soldiers, because they expected action from the Germans. Well, they saw us coming up that road in broad open daylight and got to firing on us, and they kept firing all night long. And there was a bridge down about a quarter of a mile from this college, and they bombed it all night. And in an effort to bomb that bridge, some shells came over and hit the tower of the church and filled the street full of debris, brick, rock, and everything. Just clipped it off as it came over. Fortunately, they didn't hit our building by any single shot. We stayed in there and just slept anywhere we could on those floors and Didn't have any beds or anything at all, you know. And the next day, we had orders to go to the top. And
The very next day.
the very next day, yeah. We just stayed there one night, and we had orders
Was this your company?
my company orders, 3 companies orders, had orders to go to the top in Broadleaf daylight. We had an engineering company who could cut the wire and clean up the wire, barbed wire for us to get across. And they went ahead of us, and then we had 2 other companies. My company was in the rear, and we went out a long road out of the center of the town, which was camouflaged. It had web wire way up high enough for a truck to go along without being seen. Had bushes all in the leaves, all camouflage road. And we finally came to the end of that camouflage, and we had to turn off in open view, open sunshiny view, to the Germans, and they started firing on us.
In your trucks, huh?
Walking.
Oh, you
We
were on foot.
unloaded. We unloaded. We were the infantry, and we unloaded and got into the dugouts that had been dug by the French, and we lost just about everybody in the first platoon of my company. They were tall, and they went over first.
Now wait a
and
minute.
hardly any of them came back.
I mean, when you came out of this road,
They
you were
could see
trying
us.
to get from this road into these dugouts,
Yeah, into these crisscross dugouts that they use.
and trying to get into the dugouts is when you lost all these people.
Between the end of the road, I mean, not the end of the road, but the end of the camouflage part. See, when we turned off around to get off the camouflage part, they saw us. And the sun was shining, or something like that. And they could see our guns glistening, you know, in the sun, and they got to shooting at us, flying over there with airplanes and cutting bushes all around us with bullets and bombs falling. And they just wiped out our first platoon.
Did all of you get into the ditch?
Well, we all got into, some of them got too far over and never did come back and got killed. And I was low, and I was in the last company and in the last squad of that company. And I didn't shoot a gun. I didn't, but I saw plenty of dead troops around me. One time a bomb lit near enough to kill 2 or 3 men right near me. And I was down there just a few minutes till we had orders to retreat, to go back. We just had 30 minutes or 20 minutes time to do this. We went down there after a live prisoner. That was our orders, to bring back a live prisoner, not to kill him.
The whole company?
Yeah, that was the orders, to bring back a live prisoner. 1 or 2 or as many as we could. Well, we got 1 live prisoner. We brought him back. I say we, the boys ahead of me did. And that night they took everything.
No, you mean these? See, I got the impression that you were trying to take up position in these trenches, and in trying to get into position, you came under fire and lost a lot of men. But once you got into the trenches, were the Germans occupying those positions? Or?
No, these were our trenches.
Well, how did the Germans?
There was
happen to be
no
in there?
man's land out there.
Did some of them actually cross into the German territory and overrun
Yeah,
some positions?
they got over there and got 1 man out. But see, when we turned off that road and left the camouflage part, then they all retreated.
The
They
Germans
ran back, and they just used the artillery and machine guns from there.
So they had occupied this position, and you
not
wanted to.
ours, but theirs. Theirs were pretty close to ours.
I see.
See, they had been building trenches over there too,
I know.
and they put up a creeping barrage, a smoke screen to protect us, but it didn't do much protection. See, they had put up a smoke screen, a garage in front of the troops, and the enemy couldn't see them directly, but they could see them from the sky. See the screen, and they fired a lot from airplanes and a lot from their parapets on their dugouts. Well, I lost my best friend there. I never did see him again. I heard that he had one leg practically shot off. Henry Barnes. I'll never forget him. He and I stayed together several nights in a tent together. And he got seriously wounded. I don't know what happened to him. I just don't know. But I wasn't wounded there that afternoon at all. I got back. We just scattered. We were ordered to retreat, and we were several hours all getting back to town, getting back down that camouflage road and getting back to where we were. There wasn't any civilians in the town, nobody but troops.
Well, were you with your squad all the way, or did you get
No,
broken up? Or?
Oh yeah, we got broken up, and we just knew where to go to when we went back. When we got back together, most of our troops, our boys in the tail end of our company, weren't killed or injured. But I had bullets cutting bushes all around me, and bombs bursting in front of me, and I saw 3 dead bodies. I had to go around them on the way back, and it was a battle. But I was so low. If I'd have been 6 feet tall, I'd have got killed. Because the first platoon was wiped out. It's the tallest one in the company, and the first to go into action usually. Well, we got back to the old building where the French had been teaching, the old college building, and we rambled around over it and read old books as much as we could, and looked at pictures and entertained ourselves as much as we could during the daytime. At night we didn't have any light. We just had to sit down on the floor and lie down there with our helmet used as a pillow and sleep a little bit if we could, but they shelled us all night. Every now and then we'd hear a shell come over. But they were shelling the bridge on the Moselle River. They didn't know we were in those buildings. They were shelling the bridge to hem us off, keep us from going back. And I don't know whether they hit the bridge or not. I never did see it. They must have hit it. Several bombs went off down there near the bridge. Then when we got kind of settled down from that, going over the top, we all were gathered together. And by the way, we were getting ready to eat supper one afternoon before dark, and just as our kitchen got there and we lined up to get our meal, we had orders to line up company formation, and the order came that we are going over the top. Forget about eating.
This on tape. When you say going over the top, so you, as I understand it, you don't go over the top unless you're in the trench. You're saying where a lot of you people were killed was getting into the trenches. Once you got into the trenches, were you then given a separate order to attack?
No, I had one order to go over there and get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 in the number of live men we could.
I see.
Not kill them.
So you weren't trying to take up position in the trenches. You were just trying to
just to get a
prisoners and come back.
For information. That's what they wanted. So when next morning came, we were all ordered to form in a line, and they were all night long going out there picking up the dead and trying to find the wounded and all that night. And I don't know what they did with them. They carried them to the hospital as nearly as they could, but a lot of them got killed. We had 70 men lost in our company. 250 men. We had 70 men lost. We had about 750. We had 3 companies to go over the top, the engineering company and our 2 companies. Well, we left there and we went over to the Argonne Forest. That
All
was,
right, so
we
you pulled
rode-
out of there then.
Yeah, pulled out of there in trucks, and we went over to the Argonne Forest and stayed over there 3 days and nights in the forest. And now this was September.
How far was that?
About 15, 20 miles up north, southeast of where we were. They were getting ready to make this drive. The French army, the English army, and the American army had been bringing up ammunition and guns for weeks in that forest. And I was in charge at one time while they were unloading shells. They unloaded them all over the place. But they had a way of keeping up with it. They unloaded them and stacked them by color. Well, they soon found out that I was colorblind. And I couldn't do that. I just couldn't do it. I had to do something else. So I stood guard out there 2 or 3 nights in the dark by myself, standing up by a tree. Somebody else down the line a few feet from me. And one night I was standing out there and I heard a plane coming. You could tell the difference between the Germans and the American planes because they had a better engine. And they sound differently. You could tell them by the sound. And he was way up in the air. I don't know how high. Couldn't see him till they turned their lights on. They turned their lights on from every direction, And they finally got him all in their lights, and I could see him just like a gold plane. He didn't do a thing but just go straight on over. He didn't drop any bombs.
They didn't shoot at him?
No, they didn't. He was so high.
I
He
see.
was way up there. And he's a beautiful, that plane was a gold-looking plane with all those lights on. And we went from there to the Argonne Forest, and that's where
No,
we
that's where
stayed.
you were weren't you, when you were standing guard? That was somewhere in transit?
Yeah, that's where I saw this plane.
But that wasn't in the Argonne Forest.
No, yeah, it was after I got over. That's where we were placing all of this ammunition.
I see.
It was somewhere along the Argonne Forest, but we moved from there. Took about a day to go up there where we went in trucks, several trucks, loads of us. Went up there, and then we stayed there in a fixed position for about 3 days.
Were
At
you
night.
actually in the woods?
In the woods.
They weren't all shot up?
In the forest, and wasn't any shells falling on us. But we couldn't have any light at all. Couldn't light a cigarette, light a candle, have any kind of a light. We had to go to bed before dark and stay in that tent till next morning daylight. So this friend of mine had already left me over there at that first battle. And I slept with somebody else in a dog tent. So we stayed there 3 days and nights. And on the 3rd night, about 1 o'clock, everything for miles and miles opened up. And you could just see the sky, all just flashing like lightning, all up and down that front for about 100 miles. Up and down the French army, the British army, the French army, the British army, the American army, all in different sections, all timing their bombings at the same time, shooting big
What time
guns,
was it?
big guns. And
What
they
time
just,
of the day was it?
they started in the night time, and they went 72 hours before they moved. See, and they pulverized the ground. They put a creeping barrage. All of them had their information as to how far to aim. They'd bomb this area several rounds, then they'd raise the sights a little. Bomb this area several rounds, and they just mowed the forest down. Trees cut down, everything. And they got the Germans on a run after 3 days of fire. They started retreating, and we had to follow them then. And we followed them 2 or 3 days in the Oregon forest. And then
You mean you marched
we just
toward Germany?
we'd move up, you
In
know,
trucks or?
walking,
Uh,
occupying new positions.
Did you ever see the enemy during all that time?
No, I never did see them eye to eye. I
Mm.
never did. But they were on the run, and we were moving. But they were tearing up the roads and the bridges.
Behind themselves.
Yes, sir. Everything had to be attended to. We couldn't move. They just tore up every bridge and every road, pulverized the roads almost. But we kept moving along, and finally we went over the top again in daytime.
Where
I
was
say
that,
went
do you
over the top. We advanced in daytime down a little ravine where there was a little old ditch of a creek down there. We got down in there, and they could see us from overhead, and they got to firing on us. And over here on this ridge, we got up there under some trees and bushes. Several of us got wounded then.
Mhm.
But that's I stayed there, and that was in daytime. And that night, that must have been the 15th day of October. That night, way in the night, we had lost so many men and got so disorganized till we didn't have but about 12 or 13 men of our company that we could get together.
Mm.
We didn't have any commissioned officers. We had one sergeant who took charge of our group. And night came on, and we, at one time, we were sitting on the edge of a road, you know, where it had a high embankment. It had been cut inside the hill the road had. And we were up against that wall of dirt, and the shell would come over and knock dirt down in on us.
Mhm.
They'd clip the hill, you know, and go off down in the hollow and explode. We sat there quite a time, and we came to some houses. Now, some of this is not clear to me as it used to be, but we came to some houses that were just full of holes, rifle holes, big holes, just practically pulverized. And we had to go around in our advancing. We had to go around towns. We couldn't go through them. They were just pulverized, broken down, chopped up with bullets and iron shells and everything. So one night, I don't know whether it was before midnight, or after midnight, I was a stretcher bearer, and I had carried 2 or 3 men, me and my buddy, when they'd get shell shocked. One man got shell shocked in the daytime, and we had to carry him down to the first aid station. And they were firing on us all the time, and we went through 3 piles of troops, British, French, and English, and Americans, great big piles of bodies lying on the side of the road. And we were taking this man that got shell shocked down to the first aid station.
Well, what were his symptoms? Was he unconscious, or
Well,
was he delirious?
just senseless. We thought maybe he died, but he came to
Oh, I see.
after we got him down there, and they worked with him a while.
Oh, I mean, he was unconscious.
He just unconscious, just shell shocked. The explosion was so close to him.
Oh, I see. He was
just-
actually,
just knocked
the
unconscious.
concussion knocked him
Yeah,
unconscious, I guess.
yeah.
Uh,
And then we went back, and night came on, and sometime we were moving. We didn't know what to do. We just standing around waiting to see what happened. We didn't know have any orders to go anywhere. We were in a thick bunch of trees, and this shell lit pretty close to us, and a piece of it hit this top of the. I had my hand up here with this end of the stretcher. We were carrying a stretcher around. We were moving around, and a piece of shrapnel hit that stretcher and split it open and came down it and hit my hand.
Mhm.
Now I don't know whether it was the 15th or the 16th because it was way in the night and I didn't have a watch. So I was carried in 2 or 3 hours to a first aid station somewhere around there. And I lay down. I must have been put on a truck and carried quite a little distance to where it wasn't being shelled so badly, and put in a first aid station. And it must
Here's
have
what I
been
don't understand about all this. In all this time, this was part of the Oregon Offensive. You were not actually in trenches. You were out in the open countryside.
no trenches up there.
So the Germans were being pushed back, and you were just moving from one position to the next,
Yeah,
and
just creeping along.
you were encountering just sort of sporadic resistance, except that the Germans were shelling you all this time.
Yeah,
They knew
They
you
were backing up, but they were tearing up the earth
um,
and the roads. And next morning I was put on a truck with a lot of other wounded boys, and a lot of trucks full of wounded boys. And we would have to wait for everything to pass that was going to the front.
mhm.
We could not cross a bridge if we met somebody going toward the front. Everything had to ride away toward the front, and we just took forever to get away from there.
Well, I wanted to find out about this. Well, you mean that you really didn't have any kind of commanding officer or anything in charge all that time?
Nobody but a sergeant.
Well, you didn't have a company commander or
No,
anybody?
we didn't know
You
what
just
happened.
fought as a.
Didn't know
Well,
what
you started
happened.
out as a company and wound up
We
as a
just
platoon.
wound up
is
as
that-
about 12, 15 men.
I see.
That's all we had.
Was he taking orders from
We
anybody? or-
might have had some bunches of our company somewhere else without an officer. We might have had a bunch that had an officer. I don't know. We just tore them to pieces,
Mhm.
and we got lost in the woods and we couldn't find our way around, and we just stood there and had to take it.
How long?
We got
were you-
on. I got on the truck the next morning, and they put me on a hammock along with other boys.
Well, how long were you involved in this offensive after it got started?
This was about the third or fourth day.
How
of the
many
offensive.
miles do you think you covered? in there?
Oh man, we got them on the run, and I'd gone 10, 15 miles out into the forest. when I
After
got
this
hurt.
barrage?
Yeah, after this creeping barrage.
It took 3 or 4 days. So you were
Yeah.
going 4 or 5 miles a day.
About 4 or 5 miles a day.
Uh,
It just as we move up and well, it wasn't an orderly fashion. It wasn't like the Ames fight. But we got frustrated, I guess, lost the officer and didn't know what we were doing.
Well, you must have had somebody directing you.
You did till
Somebody was saying, you wouldn't have advanced at all if there hadn't been any.
well, we had orders the last day of daylight what to do, but that night we found ourselves about a dozen of us together, and we didn't know where the officers were, whether they got killed or not. I didn't know what happened to them. I never did see them anymore. And I wanted to tell you this: we were put on a truck to be carried to a first aid station, and we were first carried to a first aid field station out in the battle zone. And I spent the rest of the night there, and then I was loaded up, and it took me from about the 11th day of October or the 12th, I don't know what day it was. Well, I did too, 15th or 16th. It was the 15th or 16th day that I got wounded way in the night. And then the next day I went to a field hospital in daylight, and they wound up my hand. It didn't do anything but just stop the bleeding and tie it up and put me on a truck. And that was about the 16th day of October, maybe the 17th, and I was about 4 or 5 days getting to a real hospital.
Mm-hmm.
I just lay up there in the truck. They finally got us on a train. When we got away from the front far enough, I was put on a train with hammocks hanging to the ceiling, boxcars, and we were just as thick as hops on there, hanging in hammocks, going to base hospital in Paris. And I was 2 or 3 days on that train.
How long were you getting to the train?
2 or 3 days after I was wounded.
What kind of attention did you have? Were there
Well,
nurses or anyone there?
Nobody.
Did you get anything to eat? Or
Well, I didn't have anything to eat for 2 or 3 days. 2 days at
could
least.
you get up and walk around?
No, I had to stay in that hammock. I rode that train all the way.
No, I mean before you got on the train.
Well, I guess they must have brought us something. I don't remember.
Could you go to the bathroom or anything?
I don't guess I had to go to the bathroom. I don't remember.
You'd have to in 3 days, didn't you?
Well, I don't know of any bathroom facilities on the train.
No, I mean before you got to the train. I mean when you were in these trucks, were you taken from the front to this railhead or something?
Improvised latrines,
You could walk around. I mean your hand was.
Yeah, I barely walk around. And I was carried to Paris on this truck. Swinging it on a truck, on a train.
Yeah.
I mean, I was first put on a truck, and then I was transferred to a train. Both times I was riding on my back on a hammock with my back toward the wall, toward the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And I stayed there at least 2 days and nights on the train that took that long to get me to Paris. And when I got to Paris, there wasn't any room to unload the truck I had. We went to the station, railroad station, and that station was full of wounded men. Barely room for nurses to walk around among the cots. And those cots were all over the streets, out on each end of the railway station, and there was not room except to walk along in places. And I wasn't left there. I was carried to a improvised hospital, put in a building that was used by troops. It was a barracks for military troops, and they had been taken out of there, and we were using that for a hospital. And that's the first time I had my hand attended to in that improvised hospital. And we had latrines outdoors there. We could go downstairs and go out there to the bathroom. But we stayed there till, well, I was lying in there when the war ended on the 11th of November. I don't know how many days.
The war ended pretty soon after you were wounded.
Yeah, I was wounded on the 16th of October, and I was a week getting straightened out and having good quarters to stay in Paris. And I had my arm got black and looked like it was going to have to be taken off at the elbow, and all just as black as it could be. And they talked about what to do about it, and finally decided it'd clear up and maybe it'd be all right, and it did. And I stayed there.
You told me one time that they were going to amputate your arm.
Yeah, they talked about it.
And you talked them out of it or something.
Yeah, I told them, oh Lord, yeah. I told them I didn't want my arm taken off. So they said they'd try it a day or two longer, and some.
Were these American doctors?
Oh yeah, American doctors. When I got to the base hospital, I got to a base hospital, and it was so full till they put me under the stairway, out in a hall, and they had troops all up and down the walls of the hall. Every room was chock full. Every hospital, every room, every building in Paris was full of wounded troops that they could use, that they could get available. And I stayed in this barracks where these troops had been living for about, well, the war ended on the 11th, and I left there about 8 or 10 days later. And shipped out to a point where they were getting ready to send the boys home.
Did they operate on your hand there?
Yeah, they kept operating, cut off a little piece now and a little piece then, trimming it up and all. It was an ordeal, I tell you.
Well, was there anyone there you knew, or were you right by
No,
yourself?
I didn't know a soul till I got to a deembarkation place.
Mm-hmm.
They had a central location down way away from Paris. They carried me down there, and we had barracks, long barracks, where there'd be a row of cots on this side and upper decks too, a row of cots here and upper decks, and a narrow alley between them.
Mm-hmm.
And they had them full of men being sent home. And I'll never forget one night, we were all getting ready to go to sleep. Every cot was full, and some old sergeant came down there wanting to know where Sergeant Gilligan was. And these boys, these troops in there, they wouldn't say a word. He kept easing on down. Anybody know where Sergeant Gilligan is? He was about half drunk. And they got to throwing shoes at him and hit him a time or two on the head and back, and he left. And never did find Sergeant Gilligan.
What was it, an MP maybe? Or?
He might have been a sergeant MP, but I don't know. He was a military sergeant, I think.
Well, when you said they operated on your hand several times, did they have adequate? What did they?
They
use?
did at the base
They
hospital.
put you to sleep, or what did they do?
No,
Local anesthetic?
Local anesthetic. They never did do anything to my hand until I got to the base hospital.
Right. Well, when you were hit, did that tear your fingers off, or did they have to cut them off?
Well, cut some of it off. They're just hanging, you know.
Yeah. Well, and then from Paris, you were taken where, do you know?
From Paris, I was carried to a place where they got the troops ready and classified to take a boat home.
Mm-hmm.
So now I started to tell you about seeing this friend. They picked out the boys from Alabama, had them lined up. Tennessee boys lined up. And they classified them in a long time doing this. And we had a company forming over here from Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia. A big group forming. They'd been called out from those 3 states or 2 states. I don't know how they did it, but it's Southern boys. And they had 2 lines forming the company as they called them out. And when they called my name, I had to step in behind the boy right in front of me. And when we were commanded to take ease, you know, I found out I'd known that boy in the United States. It was a wonderful thing. We just hugged each other. So it was so wonderful because I'd been used to all these Westerners and all these boys from the North, and I didn't know anybody. He didn't know anybody either.
You don't remember his name, I don't
No, I don't remember his name, but we had been together in the Army.
Did you get to write any letters while you were in
Yeah, I've got a
action there?
pack of letters that I never did. Mama got them and kept them, but my letters from her never did reach me.
But your letters
I
home
finally
reached her.
got my letters that I wrote her. The government sent them to me, and she kept the ones I wrote her.
Do you still have them?
Yeah,
that'd really be interesting. I mean,
Yeah, I've got a pack of letters that I wrote her that were never delivered to me. I was on the move all the time. I wasn't in one place more than a week.
she
at a
never
time.
got them. So she didn't
She
know.
never-
Did
she
she
didn't
know
know.
you were wounded?
She could hear from me.
Oh.
You see, I can write letters from me to her. And I couldn't say anything. Just tell them I was all right.
Were you able to write her when you were in the hospital?
Yeah, I got a nurse when I was got in the hospital. I got a nurse when I got in the base hospital. But I didn't write her from October the 1st when I got up at that front on about October the 1st till way up in November. I didn't write her then. She didn't know what happened to me. And I got a nurse to write her a letter, a little letter, short letter, telling her that I was wounded but not severely and that I was all right and not worry about me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really fascinating.
Let me go on.
Okay.
Then after that, getting together of the troops from different areas of the country,
Mm-hmm.
they sent me then to Brest, France. I believe it's Brest,
Mm-hmm.
on the western coast of France. Brest. They sent me there, and they had a tremendous.
Oh yeah, I see that.
They had a tremendous camp there. 100 and some odd thousand troops there. And it rained every day. Every day it rained. And they built walks up head high. A main street made out of lumber to get up on and walk through the camp. And then you'd walk downstairs every so often when you wanted to go somewhere into a place where you want to see somebody or go to your mess hall. We'd have a mess hall ever so far up and down that big walk, but we'd have to wade the mud to the walk and get up on that walk and walk through, I don't know, half a mile, down to our mess hall.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a barracks to stay in. After we got off the walk, we had a barracks and no floor in it, just mud, just dirt.
Was the war still going on now, or was it?
Well, it was over.
It was over.
That was when Wilson went to France.
Uh-huh.
He went to France after the war ended. And he came over there, while we were in Brest. This barracks we stayed in was floorless, just dirt. And there was a little ditch running through it. And water would come in over here and go out over here, and it just soaked the land all in there. And a lot of the boys got sick and had to be taken to the hospital with pneumonia and stuff, lying in there. We just didn't have any cots. We slept on that wet ground. We had blankets that they gave us, but no cots. And several of them would wake up. Every morning we'd wake up with somebody sick, have to be carried out. We stayed there several days, and we had to keep our shoes shined. Wade the mud after breakfast, come back, clean our shoes, and shine them, or else we didn't get to go home. That's a threat. Said if you don't keep your shoes shined and shaved and cleaned up, you don't get to go.
Well, you had your hand all bandaged up.
Yeah.
When you shaved with your left hand.
I got somebody to help me shave.
Uh-huh.
And anyhow, that shoe shining. Oh Lord, that shoe shining was in the mud. We'd get up on this platform. It was about as wide as a wide truck, so you could meet boys coming one way, and they'd start eating early in the morning, and they'd eat breakfast till 10, 11 o'clock, and then there'd be pie